When I talk about a good death, it's where you're sitting down and you are trying to state not only to you how you want your final hours, days, months on this earth to be in regards to medical treatment and et cetera, but it's also talking about how do you want your body prepared? How do you want your memorial to be? Because so often it's the same thing when people talk about estate planning. They think it's all about wills and death, but it's really about life and promotion of advocacy when you yourself cannot act on your own. And, the good death is, do you want to be at home? Do you specifically not want to be resuscitated if your heart stops or if you stop breathing? Well, if you don't want that, you need more than a healthcare power of attorney. You need to have what's called a POLST, a physician's order of life-sustaining treatment. Because if that's key, that if your heart stops, do not resuscitate you, your healthcare power of attorney that states that, or your DNR that states that, that's not going to stop the EMTs. The EMTs are still going to resuscitate you.
Welcome to the Throne of Wealth, the podcast that empowers you to reign over your financial future. Each episode brings you tax strategies, wealth building insights, and stories from inspiring entrepreneurs. The Throne of Wealth is brought to you by King of Kings accounting firm, where financial challenges become opportunities for growth. Let's get into it.
Welcome to another episode of The Throne of Wealth. Today we have a guest speaker, very special, dear friend of mine and professional in our community. Mentor, I will say. I don't know if she considers herself as a mentor. Shannon Pawley, an attorney here in the state of Georgia with, oh my God, extremely experienced and professional in elderly estate planning law. She's here with us today. She's bringing us very important information for planning of our future and how do we protect ourselves from ourselves. Shannon, welcome.
Thank you so very much for such a warm introduction there, Karen. It's good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you too. I am so grateful and honored to share this space with you today, Shannon, and to hear all about the current changes that we're having in with this administration, things that are happening in 2025, in the atmosphere of what we're seeing and perceiving from our clients and people that we're interacting with on a day-to-day. I would like to learn more on your end. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? How are the clients?
So one of the things I will say is that whenever there's a change of an administration, there's always a lot of concerns because unfortunately, not to get on a soapbox, but in our U.S. culture and especially political culture, the forgotten classes are normally children and the elderly. And as such, there's a great grandstanding for programs for them, but then as there's great grandstanding at the beginning, it ends up being more of a reduction or threat of reduction. And that's kind of what we're dealing with right now. As I think we're all seeing, we are seeing a lean expression, shall I say, with our governmental agencies and our budget. And as they're trying to live kind of like that whole Sigma or Six Sigma lean philosophy, it's got a lot of fear that's happening, especially when they're starting about cutbacks. Although this wasn't specifically in regards to, for example, Medicaid cutbacks or et cetera that they're speaking of, just real time. I just recently left a presentation where I was doing a will workshop. One of my persons in there worked for the IRS, and she got called in for one of the emergency meetings and is pretty sure that she was being let go today. So as we're talking about things being lean, it's all different gambits here. But what I will say is one of my biggest comments I say to people is don't fret about what may be, just focus on how it is today and try to get your qualification today. Especially if we're talking about potential cutbacks, let's sit down and try to get you into an eligible status ASAP so that ideally when and if these do pass law, they're usually always going to have some form of a grandfather in them. so that you will still grandfather in with your qualification, even if something in the new statutory law may change eligibility requirements or et cetera. Because usually it's always proactive, not retroactive in most cases. And also, as I'm talking to people as they're getting concerns, this is also one of the reasons, and also the negative stigma that comes with skilled nursing facilities like nursing home, why aging in place is such a big focus for so many people. I'm having more people come in to talk to me about aging in place than they are talking to me actually about Medicaid strategy. I think it's a cultural shift that we're having. It is a press 6 o'clock news shift that we're having, but also I think it's the political climate shift that is also wanting people just to be able to stand their ground, be in a familiar environment, support that which they've already built, and continue to live in that environment of familiarity through the rest of their years.
Wow, that's powerful, Shannon. What will be that one thing that you will say that we as the younger generations should do for ourselves to protect ourselves in the near years, and what should we do for our parents? What conversation should we be having? I asked this question. I'm gonna leave you a little bit of background on this. I was talking with my dad last night. And I was asking him, and I said, I would like to know how many properties you own. And we never had this conversation before. And I'm like, oh, Jesus, like I'm the only child. And I never had asked this conversation before. And then I was like, I don't know how much real estate you own. I don't know what you have. And if in an event that you're not here, where would I find such information? Who is listed as beneficiary in the process? And then not to go, and I talk openly about this because it's my situation, it's not no one else, so I'm freely to say it, but I'm gonna go farther, Shannon. My dad is disabled. And when I was asking these questions last night, I'm like, oh, Jesus, I have overlooked at this because in the event that if he were to be hospitalized, you talk about this all the time, and we just had an event in January 18. And I'm not here thinking about my household, but I'm thinking about the clients and everyone else. That's why leading the person in the mirror is just so difficult at times. Yes. And I'm looking and thinking of all of these things because I'm remembering that we have these recordings today. And I'm here, okay, I don't have this in the event if something were to happen to my father. If I need to sign something, I don't have also authorization for finances. So you see, we don't think this on a day-to-day. This is not common-based for us.
Very often with estate planning, it's reactive. At least the initial exposure is reactive, is what I mean by that. Most importantly, for you, in my generation, but also our parents, in order to be their advocate, in order to protect, in order to be protected during your life, you got to have that financial power of attorney. You got to have that healthcare power of attorney. Because just because you are your father's daughter, you don't have legal standing to speak on his behalf or to make decisions for him or have access to his accounts. And I can guarantee you, he wants you to be his advocate. And so that's why it's important to have these documents. The other thing that I emphasize is having those hard conversations. And in those hard conversations is talking about taboo topics. We're going to need to talk about finances. We're going to have to talk about assets. We're going to have to talk about death. Because I always tell people that I think we all have our own personal definition of what a good life is, but nobody really talks about what is a good death and what is a good process leading up to your passing. And the biggest gift that I always tell people that you can give through estate planning is peace of mind for both yourself, but also sanctity and security for your loved ones after passing, that they can grieve without being in a state of chaos of trying to handle your affairs.
Wow, you said good debt. Can you explain a little bit more what good debt is, Shannon?
Okay, so when I talk about a good death, it's where you're sitting down and you are trying to state not only to you how you want your final hours, days, months on this earth to be in regards to medical treatment and et cetera, but it's also talking about how do you want your body prepared? How do you want your memorial to be? Because so often, it's the same thing when people talk about estate planning. They think it's all about wills and death, but it's really about life and promotion of advocacy when you yourself cannot act on your own. And, the good death is, do you want to be at home? Do you specifically not want to be resuscitated if your heart stops or if you stop breathing? Well, if you don't want that, you need more than a healthcare power of attorney. You need to have what's called a POLST, a physician's order of life-sustaining treatment. Because if that's key, that if your heart stops, do not resuscitate you, your healthcare power of attorney that states that, or your DNR that states that, that's not going to stop the EMTs. The EMTs are still going to resuscitate you. To stop the EMT, who's going to be the one that's going to come out on that emergency situation, you need to have that POLST so that, once again, you can have a good death on your terms. It's not going to be you're resuscitated, and now you went from a mild state of dementia to advanced dementia in a matter of days. So it really is. It's all about having the hard conversations to start to create the safety nets and the what ifs. Because if you don't have that conversation about the what ifs, then the family is in just confusion and turmoil. And in that turmoil, everybody's going to think they're properly advocating for you, but it may be completely different focuses in that advocacy. And where you would want your family to come together in those times of crisis, it's going to cause division and crumbling of the relationships, as in their mind, they think they're advocating for you, but because you weren't clear in your preparation of detailing out what your good death is, it's left the family in disrepair, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's something that, we have to prepare and we have to think of. Shannon, with the climate of, having a lot of entrepreneurs, business owners that have been in this country for over 40 or plus years, and yet they still don't have some sort of like legal status and things like that. Their biggest concern is that they own real estate. They have their U.S. citizen children here. They have their spouse that are in the States, and they own all of these properties or businesses. In the event that they were to be removed or something happens to them, how do they protect themselves and their families and their assets that they have here? Protect from a way that they don't go into the whole process of what you have explained before. If you don't have a trust or if you don't have your assets structure, if you don't have these legal documents in place. I'm getting a lot of calls in my office. Just last week we counted, over 80 companies that came in, and we're talking about business owners that are, being in the U.S. for, like I mentioned, more than 2 decades, and they have been able to create this wealth, and they now have these properties and own all of these assets, but yet they still don't have some sort of estate planning in place. What would, a recommendation or key takeaways would be for these folks?
Well, one of the first things that we're talking about here, and we're talking about the business owners and we're talking about property, is the question becomes who owns the property? Do they as the individual own the property, or is it their business? And also, they have a business. That business is probably going to have tools of trade, if not its own property, bank accounts, or et cetera. So this is I'm going to call it a multi-dimensional focus of protection here, because you have certain protections through your business continuity plan. Got to make sure you have a business continuity plan. And in that, trying to confirm what's going to happen. So is this a single member LLC, for example? Okay, well, that's going to be a little bit of an issue because, number one, you don't want to die without your individual name, because then your business affairs, because you're the sole owner, is going to be part of probate. So what if we sit down and try to do more of a partnership with the children, a family LLC, and have within that your business continuity plan? Or if the property is not within your business, it is property that you have created through your own personal wealth, well, then at that point, we can talk about a trust, but if we're trying not to focus on the trust, then let's focus on how is the property owned at this time. Is it owned as what's called tenants in common? This means husband owns 50%, wife owns 50%. If wife passes away, her 50% is deemed to be in her individual name, has to go through probate. Well, maybe we don't want that. Maybe we want what's called joint tenancy with right of survivorship. Once again, I call this kind of like armchair estate planning that at a bare minimum you need to understand and implement if you have nothing else. But with joint tenancy with right of survivorship, husband has an ownership interest, wife has an ownership interest. This time husband passes away, wife is the survivor, and due to how that deed being joint tenancy with right of survivorship, as the survivor, she is the owner without having to go through probate. As of July 1st of 2024, Georgia started to recognize a whole new way that property can be deeded. And they have started to recognize what's called transfer on death deeds. Now, what I will say is I personally do not like how Georgia statute is set up, the transfer on death deeds. My parents are in Virginia. And my parents, with their estate planning attorney, who said, no, we're not going to do a trust. We're going to transfer on death deed instead for their property because they own real property. In Virginia, as soon as they die under the transfer on death deed, I'm automatically, my sister and I, the owners, automatically, with no affirmative acts needed except for just like a new deed. In Georgia, it requires affirmative acts by the people that are supposed to inherit under the transfer on death deed. And they have 9 months to perfect their interest statutorily. And if they don't, then they lose their interest and is deemed as though that person passed away with it in their individual name, and it passes through the probate court. Now, why I'm not loving this one, because to me, I think that it's actually setting up families for falsely believing that they're secure with the transfer on death deed, without people understanding that you have to do affirmative acts to perfect your interest. And now it's just opening up potentially to heirs property situation, which when I'm licensed in Michigan and Georgia. Michigan, heirs property wasn't that big of an issue, but here in Georgia, we've got a lot of family properties where grandfather owned it and it's supposed to stay in the family, but unfortunately, no, it's still in grandfather's name. They've never transferred it out under the terms of the will or intestacy. And now, because they didn't clean it up immediately in probate, and now people have passed away since then, you could be looking at like 6, 7, 8, 20 different probates to clean property ownership to have it in proper deeded title. So I know you were talking about property, and I'm saying like the easiest way to understand is how the title is, but also don't put a significant faith in this new product until I think I think Georgia's statutes are going to be updated, because this is such a statutory burden that instead of trying to prevent heirs property, I think is creating the confusion that's going to have more properties as heirs property where they believe that it was transferred to them, but they did not perfect it statutorily within 9 months. So I don't know if I answered your question or created more mud unsettling of the topic, but if nothing else, it's kind of one of those buyer beware, be educated, work with experts, and realize it's not just a deed, it's a strategy, and make sure that all parties in the strategy understand it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Because if someone doesn't have the understanding it, in the event that something were to happen, people will think, well, I just leave it and continue to pay. I do have a client that was in that situation last year, and the owner of the house had passed away, which was the spouse, and she continued to just pay the mortgage and didn't update any paperwork. And now she was like, the bank won't send me the title. And I don't have access. And I'm like, the house was never on your name to begin with, but you need to go to seek help and legal help in here. But they continued to pay for many years and never updated it or never did anything with the bank or the county. I don't know what steps needed to be followed in that process, but you can see that, sometimes we just assume that because someone in our family owned this, I can keep the property and I can continue to operate or pay so I won't lose it. But yeah, it's not yours, or with these new changes, it could, potentially be even taken away from you. That's very, very interesting.
You bring up an interesting thing too, as you're talking about the spouse that never went through probate but kept paying the mortgage. I have not personally experienced this, but some my peers have expressed this is Okay, the house was solely in spouse one's name. Spouse one passed away. Spouse two is now continuing to pay the mortgage and the homeowner's insurance, but never shifts the homeowner's insurance out of the decedent's name. Now, the house catches on fire, a tree falls on it, whatever it may be, and they try to do a claim where they've been paying the insurance the whole time, and they can't make a claim because the insurance policy is the name of the decedent. And the best they'll say is, at best, we'll give you a refund of what you paid, but no, we're not going to accept your claim. So that's the other significant concern too, not just the ownership, but also the continuation of the contractual relationships that the decedent may have had with the, in regards to the property, like homeowners insurance and et cetera.
Wow, that's amazing. So Shannon, what would be one, I have a few questions here that I want to ask you. What's the best financial advice that you have ever received?
The best financial advice that I ever have received is actually to not think that I'm the smartest person in the room. I believe that 100%, and the value of experts. And just because you're an expert in one thing doesn't mean you're an expert in all. And be aware that if you want to have true expertise in your financial strategy, it's not one person, it's a team. I mean, I think it was Hillary Clinton that, it takes a village. Well, it kind of takes a village in multiple aspects of your life, especially in regards to, financial and business strategy.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing because that's powerful. You surround yourself with a group of experts, and like you said, it's not one knows it all, right? I always say that if you do multiple things or you generalize too much, then you technically kind of don't know what you're doing. Yes. So you can be an expert in every area, and it's not like when you have somebody that specializes in a particular area. What would be one habit that you have significantly, that has significantly contributed to your success? Something that you said, I do this, and I know that this has helped me throughout the years.
I think it's listening. Because by listening to others and just those that are around you, they see things from a different perspective. We're too intimately involved in our own problems, our struggles, and our triumphs that if we listen to other persons from their perspective, they'll see it differently. And a lot of times you can grow or learn new opportunities that may be available for you. I use the example as though the event is at the top of a mountain. And everybody is in different places, around the mountain, up the mountain, or down the mountain. They're all looking at the same thing, but they're all seeing it from different perspectives. And not one perspective is right. They're all right for the different reasons. So you got to be open and listening. And through the listening, that's where you're going to get your growth.
That's powerful. What would be some, takeaways or advice that you would give to the audience to implement, and to start doing, not to wait? Because sometimes we're like, we'll postpone it. We'll do it when we can. No, we can now. We don't have to wait for tomorrow.
The very first thing that I implement to everybody in the audience, if you do not currently have a financial power of attorney and a healthcare power of attorney, naming at least a primary and a backup, preferably a primary, a backup, and a backup to the backup. That's the first thing you need to do. Secondly, when you're creating these powers of attorney, do not make them a springing power of attorney. What is a springing power of attorney? Springing power of attorney is where you say, okay, yes, Karen, I'm appointing you as my financial power of attorney, but you have no power until a doctor analyzes me and on their letterhead states that I am incapacitated and not able to make my own legal decisions. So unless you get that, you have no power. Well, guess what? Number one, when you need the powers under a power of attorney, you need them at that moment. It's an emergency situation. Number two is not only are you making it that additional delay, especially with the healthcare. Healthcare emergencies, that first 3 to 5 hours is where all the big life-changing decisions are. Do not make your healthcare power of attorney springing. And then lastly, if it's a financial every single time that they're going to try to utilize it, they're going to have that doctor's note to support that they have the authority. And then it just opens it up even more for the person to go, I don't know who this doctor is. We need to authenticate this from the doctor. And yeah, so yes, you need powers of attorney. Do not make them springing. And within your powers of attorney, you're naming people that you trust, but also people that can actually serve in the role. Do not name your son Gambling Gary, your financial power of attorney, because he doesn't have financial responsibility. In addition, do not name melodramatic Mindy your healthcare power of attorney, because she's going to be so melodramatic on every single one of your health situations that she's going to want the focus more on her because she can't make the decision. So just also make sure when you create these powers of attorney as what I consider your essential, don't make them springing, and also make sure that the person you are appointing, they can properly advocate for you because they have both the personal and intellectual strength for the needs that you have in those documents.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. What would be something that you will say, people that have created their wealth and are in the path of creating their wealth, which is two different type of groups there, something that they should have in mind?
So if you're creating your wealth through a business trajectory, number one is make sure that you have your business documents properly drafted, especially if you're doing a partnership. And in that partnership, make sure you're referencing how that partnership can be dissolved. That's not what you want to think about when you're all excited about doing a startup, but you've got to think of the negative of how you all guys can separate when you least like yourselves and you don't want to work together. Number two is within your business documents, reference how you are going to allow business continuity of ownership. For example, is there going to be something where you say you're 51% and your spouse is 49%, and whoever dies first, the company can buy out their interest for X amount? Or their interest dies with them, trying to keep it from going through probate. Realize the value of your actual business documents on your formation. And the last thing I would emphasize is always be a student. Continue to seek out expertise, not only in your field, but also just in regards to being an entrepreneur, because one, very often is a very lonely track that you may be going down. You need the comradeship. Number two, you need people that are ignited by the challenges and the excitement of ownership instead of seeing it as a burden and risk. And then lastly, when you are sharing the successes, inspire others. I really believe that you should always give back as you have your success. And that may be with you mentoring another person. Maybe it is you are developing your child to take over. Always realize, I think that we have a responsibility to always build up people with each interaction. And just as we always want to have mentors, we also should be mentees, and we should be serving both roles simultaneously in developing yourself while you're developing others at the same time through your successes.
This is amazing. I was having a conversation with someone, and he mentioned entrepreneurship and wealth, it's created through service. And in that, I was meditating to that this morning, and I'm like, he's right. We have to serve others. You have to have, that hunger, that ability to be able to put yourself last and put others before. If we want to create something bigger than ourselves, and this is where we think of our family members, those close to us, when we structure our companies correctly, when we prepare these financial power of attorneys or medical power of attorneys, or when we prepare all this paperwork, because I don't have to be 60 or 70 or, at retired age for me to have a plan in place. We don't know, and we don't know when is, my daughter calls it our expiration date. I don't know when I'm going to expire. One thing I do know for a fact that she has told me that I cannot expire before 90. So I'm believing in that. But, realistically speaking, this is anyone out there. Like you were mentioning earlier in one of our events in January. we need to have this plan in place if we are old enough to make a decision, such as like 80 years old. We should be making these decisions of having these plans in place. And so wealth is created through servicing others, servicing if it's through a business, right? We need something that obviously generates cash flow, our jobs, our business, and our investments that we're making out there. But if we're working so hard to make these investments, why are we going to give this as a burden to our families or loved ones when we don't protect them? So I think that's my message to the audience and to the listeners, that you don't have to be a certain age. You don't have to be in your early 20s, late 20s at any time. And this is the time for us to take action, to protect ourselves and to work hard, man. Entrepreneurship, you just said it, Shannon, in such a lovable way. But somebody said it earlier in the conversation in such a drastically way that entrepreneurship, it's a lonely path. And it doesn't get easier, it gets harder. And being in business for over a decade, we know that you have to put in the work. You have to put in the work. And if you have already put in all of this work to create what you have, why not protect it? Why not document it?
And I emphasize very often, your business is your first child that you ever had. And just like you want to protect your children, you have that same protection of your business, ultimately for your children, but you have that same intimacy, that same connection, that same identity through your business like you do when you hold that newborn child in your arms.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a 24/7. We're thinking of our business every day. There's no, people's like, I close and I don't do business on Sunday, but what topics are you talking on Sunday where you're having dinner or lunch, right? When you gather in gatherings, your business. So it's a 24/7. It's like part of you. So thank you so much, Shannon. I just have one question for you. What will be that one or lesson that you said, I have learned this in intro through my career or through serving many clients, that one thing that I could say that it, stands out, and if others can prevent or benefit from, this is something that they should take into consideration?
My personal biggest growth, as well as most of my clients, our biggest growth has been after we conquer our darkest hour.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us. Again, Shannon, if somebody wants to contact you or your team, how can they get in touch with your team to schedule a consultation?
Certainly. Our phone number is 404-370-0696, and our website is www.elder, E-L-D-E-R, law, L-A-W, Georgia, Georgia.com.
Lovely. So, and you guys do see your office that's meeting in person and as well as virtual, right?
Correct.
Okay, because we have people that obviously are not, they're in Georgia, but outside, 2 to 3, 4 hours drive. They just can hop into Zoom or a call, and they just, can talk to you, your office or your legal teams to get
Correct.
it. Okay, beautiful. Well, thank you, Shannon, so much for this. We enjoyed it, and we hope to repeat this again.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great day.
You as well.
Thanks for listening to The Throne of Wealth. Be sure to subscribe, share, and leave a review to help others find the show. A special thanks to our sponsor, King of Kings Accounting Firm, dedicated to helping you build and protect wealth for generations. Until next time, take the reins of your financial future and lead with confidence.